All right, so see the game against
Grandmaster Timman from Holland, yes.
From Holland.
Yes.
All right.
So d4, knight f6, c4. Surprising enough, he played King's Indian against me because he played very well normally the Nimzovich, you know. But here he played g6 and he accepted to play King's Indian. It's clear that he prepared something, you know, some home analysis.
And not surprisingly, you played the Zemish?
I played the Zemish, of course. So.
All right.
So, okay, therefore the game will be very interesting, okay. After f3 castle, bishop e3, and here he played the old move, you know, the old line, e5. You remember my games against Gligorich and many others, you know, very strong grandmasters. Okay, instead of e5, he could play knight bd7, knight c6, b6, a6, a lot of games, you know, other possibilities, you know. So, okay, d5, c6, queen d2, and he took in d5, I took in d5, and he played knight a6, and I castle alongside. Already this is a very interesting decision because white accepts to play a very sharp game, and it's a little bit unusual because white doesn't attack on the king side as in any other game in King's Indian. White prepares his counterplay or his attacking chances on the queen side. This is therefore the game is a little bit unusual, you see.
Yeah.
So, and also it's unusual because your king is there, you know.
Is here and this is exposed?
Well, it seems, but it's not exposed. The king is in a very safe position, you see. But you have to play very well. The move order is very important, again, you know. So castle, bishop d7, king b1, and knight c5, and knight g2. Well, theory until now. And here he played the best move, considered the best move, b5, and black plays very aggressively, and he wants to take the initiative here. The game is more or less unclear because it's a line recommended by Kasparov himself for black, you know.
For black?
For black.
But here, question...
b5 is probably the best move. If you play something else instead of b5, a6 for instance, after knight c1, white waits a little bit and gives you the possibility to move something on the other side, knight h5 or something. He doesn't look and plays b4, and clear advantage for white, because white has all the pieces on the queen side, and therefore he's better in all kinds of positions, you know. Even if he has the king there for the moment in b1, you know, but he's not exposed at all, you know.
But wasn't better maybe to give this bishop on the...
No. If you give the bishop, you are clearly worse with white, you know.
Yeah, why?
Yeah, because the idea is like this. If you take, for instance, in the c5, the bishop from e3 is a very strong piece. If you give this bishop in c5, he's free to play on the other side afterwards. I mean, instead of a knight g2,
yes.
Knight g2, okay, he takes. And now what do you do with white? What is the idea for white?
You see, I'm thinking that this knight
it's dangerous. It's not dangerous because you can never take the pawn. Even if you take the pawn, you can open, you know, the position for black, because now he has a very strong bishop from g7, and if he can open the diagonal, it's almost finished for white. I mean, white is already in a very dangerous situation. You have to defend now with white, you see. The position is like this. If you decide to give the black bishop, the position is dangerous even if you have a pawn. Extra pawn with white. But if you have even pawns, then, you know, you can imagine. The idea for black is very easy. He can play a6, b5, c4, b4, and he has attacking chances for nothing, you see. White has no counterplay at all. Because even on the other side, you can't attack if you don't have the black bishop. You don't have any chance to attack the black king. And if you give this possibility, you have to look, and the other one attacks you. You know, I mean, yeah.
So
it's a very bad decision to take the knight. You see.
Okay.
But it's move by move. The plan is very unclear. You see. So knight g2 is good, and after b5, here the theory said that black is okay. Black has a very good game. That was the conclusion of the theoretical part of the game. I mean, every theory book, said that black is all right and maybe has some better chances. B4 is complete novelty, in the world of chess in that time.
Okay.
Yeah, B4. And after B4, it was my move. I mean,
you prepared
home theory, yes.
But what was before this move? Like before?
Well, they played something else, knight c1 or something. After knight c1, it's clear that, or a3, for instance. Okay, after a3, rook b8 is clear that black is okay. And even after a5 is clear that black has the initiative. You see?
Yes.
Black is coming. You have to,
to answer.
Try to have some counterplay. And b4 is very strong. Now, the first position where black has to decide. If he goes back to a6, after a3, he lost 2 tempos, and white has complete initiative. You see? Now the knight is a little bit out of play. For the moment, he can't move. And the idea for white is very clear. Knight e2, c1, b3, threatening to come to a5. And at the same time, you're attacking twice the pawn from b5. It's clear that white is much better. Afterwards, he has the possibility to come with the rook on c1 and have the open file.
Rook c1.
Rook c1, clearly better for white.
Yes.
Yes, it's clearly better for white. So after knight a4, he tries to do something very quickly and have still the initiative on the queen side. Okay, after knight a4, white takes in a4, of course. He takes, and I play knight c3. He played knight e8, and here white has 2 possibilities. Play like in our game, bishop d3, or trying to have clear initiative by holding the position with the pawn on b4 and a3. The idea was, the alternative was a3 first, and then king a2 after rook b8. And okay, it's clearly better for white, even here, because you can put the rook in b1 and in c1 and bishop d3. No threat at all, clearly better for white, But okay, I accepted the risk, okay, after knight e8. Of course, I saw the alternative. And after knight e8, I played bishop d3. And now after bishop d3, you are ready to sacrifice your pawn for a very strong initiative with white, Everything will be forced. Black wants to capture the pawn, and you accept to give the pawn. But the initiative would be very strong, you see. So everything is forced. Now a3, now he has to play a5. A5, b5, of course. b5, knight c7. He attacks 3 times. Now, if you put the queen in b2 or queen in e2, black has a fantastic game, After queen e8, for instance, if you lose the pawn in b5, is clearly better for black, But the idea is clear enough and very strong for white also. He gives the pawn, white gives the pawn for a very strong initiative, you see.
Even so, is the pawn in front of the...
But now the move order again is very important. You push first in b6 to oblige the knight to come in b6, not in b5. You see? Okay, so after knight a8, you move the king. You move the king in a2. Again, you sacrifice the pawn. He has to take the pawn, of course, and now rook b1. f5, and the other rook in c1. You see? Now it's clear. White gave a pawn, but all the pieces are there,
Yes. Yeah.
Now he is ready for any kind of complication, So you have to play very well with black to try to have some counterplay. I mean, everything is forced. Now you take with the knight. He has no time to take in d5 because he loses a piece in one move. After knight d5, bishop c4, he can resign. Yes. He spins and he loses a piece, no?
Yeah.
Okay, so the only good move is bishop f5. And after bishop takes bishop f5, queen takes a5. Okay, we took back our pawn. We have a very strong initiative. White is better in all kinds of positions. And we play. We'll see what happens. But it's clear that white has a better game here in all kinds of positions. No? Again, everything is forced. He has to move the knight because otherwise he loses a piece. No? So you have time to take in d8. He took, and now white obliges the opponent to give the bishop in e4, and now we have a small edge because we have two bishops, and the position is clearly better for white. And not only this, but for any kind of endgame, he has a weak pawn in a4. This is very important. That wins the game, finally, you know. The fact that in endgame we can win the pawn and have a better, much better endgame, you know. All right, so from this moment, he has to defend very well to try to equalize the position somehow, you know. So, okay, rook c8, rook c1. We won the endgame, you know. He tries not to accept the endgame and to arrive in some kind of position with different color bishops, you know. The only hope for black here is to give you the possibility to trade you a black bishop against the knight. If he arrives to this kind of position, he has a good hope for draw, you know. All right, so here bishop e2, you keep the file closed, you know. Knight c5 probably the best move, and now rook c4. Now, in some kind of position later on, you want the pawn, you know. He has to move something and try to get some counterplay, but it's not so easy, you know. So finally...
Here it wasn't better to take directly the knight.
It was possible, but it's more or less drawish, the position. Why? Because if you take immediately the pawn, yes. You take in c5, he takes back, you take with the rook, and now immediately rook f2. Rook f2, you have to move only rook c2, and after rook c2, he puts the bishop in f8. Even if he has a pawn less, that it's almost impossible to win, you know, because you can't advance the pawn. He wants to take back the pawn in h2, and the position is more or less drawish, you know. Yeah. Even if you have the free pawn on a3, it's very difficult to realize the advantage, you know. So if you have more pieces on board, it's always better, you know. So rook c4. Now, probably the best counterplay for him was to play knight b3, trying to come to d4. This is the idea, after knight b3. He gives you the move and wants to put the knight in d4. And now, the best move again, g5 now. I played g5, okay. Good. You could take immediately the pawn in a4, but after rook takes a4, knight d4, again it's very difficult to do something because you have to move something. But what? If you give the bishop in d4, probably you never win this with white. And you don't have coordination, then he has a very strong idea, rook f2 immediately, and you know, it's not clear who is better, you know.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, you have to be careful also to play a very good order for, so g5 is very good. Knight d4, all right, he arrived where he wanted, you know, in d4. And after knight, bishop g4, if possible, we want to have an endgame, I mean, to trade the rooks, and the two bishops will be very strong, and he lose the pawn from a4. This is the whole idea, the endgame, you see? So the only good move, rook f1.
You'll win a pawn, but the right pawn.
The right pawn is enough, of course, you'll see. The realization will be very beautiful. So he plays back now, and now rook c8. And now, why is so important? Because he couldn't come back to f7, not to trade rooks, but he has no time. Okay. With the rook in c1, he has no time to put the rook in f7 because he loses immediately. After rook f7, bishop takes d4 and bishop e6, and it's finished.
Yes.
You see, he loses the exchange and maybe more than the exchange, you see. After bishop e6, he can resign. No? So, right, has no time, has to put the rook in f8. And after rook f8, we can trade the rooks. And the endgame is there, and we win the endgame by force, you'll see. You have to play very well, but you can realize, finally. You know. It's not so complicated, but it's very nice. So, we are coming with white, rooks, king c3, bishop d8, bishop d1 attacking immediately the pawn, no? He plays the best move, bishop b6. Now finally the bishop is active, but it's too late, you know. And now, of course, we don't take immediately because he has time to play knight b5 check, and he saves probably the game, you know. So king c4 first. Now king c4 again has to move something against the pawn from a3. He moved immediately bishop c5. And now we can defend the pawn, but the pawn from a4 is still attacked. And he can't protect the pawn. If he loses the pawn from a4, all endgame are lost for black, you see. So, right. The rest is, the idea is very simple. You have to realize the big advantage for white, you see.
Yeah.
You have to demonstrate a very good technique. So, okay, so bishop b2. The only important pawn now is the pawn from a3. That wins the game, you see. You give back a pawn from h2, but it's not important, you see. Okay, and now, you move the pawn. a5, king there, a6, king c7, king b5. Again, the best move. After king b5, he's lost in any position, you know. Now, it's too much. The pawn from a6 is exceptionally strong, and he loses in every position, you'll see. And it's very easy. Here is very easy already. He can't protect anymore. And after this check, it's clear that white is coming with the bishop, and the threat is also a7 check and king c6. Here he could resign, of course, but we played a little bit more until the end. No. There are some mate threats also, you know, with the bishop g4, bishop d7, bishop c6 mate. This is one of the ideas, you know.
Oh, interesting.
So he played back with the knight, of course. Now check, no? King a8, king b7, pardon, king b7, and now bishop c7. Now it's clear he can't take because queens, you know, he takes himself. And if he loses the pawn from d6, is decisive, you know, I mean, he can resign. Of course, we don't give the pawn, no? But the idea is the same. We want to take the pawn. But here's no defense anymore. The only...
if he takes the pawn now, what is happening? If he takes here the
pawn? He loses immediately. Bishop takes d6, and then the pawn from d5 will go to make a queen very quickly, you know. d6, d7, d8, you know, queen. It's no defense. He loses at least a piece, you know, in every kind of position. Yeah. So bishop f4, bishop takes, knight d7, okay. I told you, he could resign already, you know. h5, I took in h6, he took back in h6, and now I played
bishop d1.
Bishop d1, yeah. Preparing this idea with bishop g4, you know. So bishop g4, knight b6, and bishop c5, and he resigned. Now, if he goes back, the only move is to go back to a8, and after knight a8, bishop d7, and okay, finished. No? The idea is to give a check in c6, and okay, finished. Yeah. Well, the game was very, very interesting, very complicated, and in that time, very important theoretically. Because
he had only one weakness, the pawn. And
one weakness, but it was enough. And by this level, the game, therefore, was very complicated because it was a very, very important improvement compared with the games from Kasparov, you know, who recommended this as a main line for black, you know. And, it seems that the idea is very good for white. But I told you, at this level, everything was very complicated all the time, you know. So you have to play perfect game to win. You know, so,
you can expect anything from
of course,
each player.
The best players of the world, you know, what can you do? Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gheorghiu.
You're welcome.